Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover planetary transits or Gochara for July 2025. It seems like the theme for this month is raising awareness. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So let's take a look at what we got here. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Just a few announcements and some orientation. Auto dubbing is now available on this channel in 8 languages listed here. If you have any feedback about this feature, it's a relatively new feature on some channels on YouTube. I'd like to hear if it's helpful or not. You can comment down below. Also, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists. I'm good about organizing my videos into different playlists so that different videos are easier to find. Like this type of talk on my monthly talks or my Gochara transits playlist. But I have others as well, like bhavas, houses, yogas, planetary combinations, and others. If you like to learn astrology by looking at birth charts of famous people, places, or moments in time, you can check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video where I have a list of all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel. I mean, for my monthly videos, I typically look at 3 famous charts, but you wouldn't know by the title of the video that I've got 3 famous charts in the video. So, also, my newest teaching videos, in case you've missed any, parvata and kahala yogas for power, leadership, and wealth. What is mundane astrology? And then Sagittarius constellation or Dani Rashi. And if you're new to all this and would like to start learning Vedic astrology and get a good foundation, I've listed at the bottom of the slide the videos I would start with first to make sure you have a solid foundation to either continue learning Vedic astrology or at least get more out of talks like this, which are mostly interpretation talks. Okay, so here we go. All right, so first up, let's talk about the dates when things are moving in the sky. So July 5th, Sun enters Purnavasu Nakshatra. July 6th, Mercury enters Ashlesha Nakshatra, and Saturn has a direct aspect on Venus. July 8th, Venus enters Rohini Nakshatra. July 9th, Jupiter leaves combustion or asta. July 10th, there's a full moon in Sagittarius, or Danu, and it's going to be in Purvashada Nakshatra. July 12th, Saturn goes retrograde. July 16th, let me just get some water here. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. July 16th, the Sun enters Cancer, or Karaka, and this is a samkranti shift of Sun changing signs. So there's actually I have a whole video on that and how to work with that energy. July 18th, Mercury goes retrograde or vakri. July 19th, Sun enters Pusha Nakshatra. July 20th, Venus enters Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. Ketu enters Purva Falguni Nakshatra. 22nd of July, Mars crosses Ketu, and it also enters Uttar Falguni Nakshatra that same day. July 24th, there's a new moon in Cancer, Pushya Nakshatra specifically. July 25th, Mercury goes combust, and Venus enters Gemini or Mithuna. And July 28th, Mars enters Virgo or Kanya. And July 29th, Mercury enters Pushya Nakshatra. July 31st, Venus enters Ardra Nakshatra. Okay, so that's just when things are changing around. So let's look at the collective energy first. So I have 2 charts here, and this is how the sky pattern is shifting from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. So on the left, we have July 1st, and on the right, we have July 31st. Both of these charts are oriented so that they're an Aries rising, or ascendant chart. Okay, if you're not familiar, these are North Indian style charts, and the top diamond in the middle, this is essentially what we call the ascendant, rising sign, first house, or lugna in Sanskrit. Okay, these are all different names of the same thing. So the lugna refers to the constellation that's rising in the east as somebody is born. Okay. Then to get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise or up to the left. So in this first chart, On the left, we have Venus in the second house, okay, because you count inclusively from the lagna. So 1, 2, Venus in the second house. And then third house, 1, 2, 3, you got Jupiter and Sun in the third house. Okay, and then you can count the rest. And the reason why I have both of these charts oriented towards Aries rising or Mesha Lagna is because when you take an Aries rising chart, essentially what that is, when you put the first zodiac constellation of Aries in the first house, what that does is it creates like a horoscope for the entire world or all of humanity. So we're essentially looking at collective energy here. Okay. So this July 1st chart on the left, the exact time is 1:12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's New York time. That's the time zone I live in. The time is not that so important. The main thing is that this is, again, these are both oriented to 1 degree of Aries, okay, so we can compare how things are moving in the sky. So in this first chart, the moon nakshatras are lunar mansions. If you're not familiar, there are 27 lunar mansions. Each one has a different energy. And every night the moon passes into a different one. And so after 27 nights or so, you get a lunar month. Okay. So the moon in this first chart is an Uttra Falguni. Okay. Uttra Falguni is symbolized by a hammock, which usually has pretty nice energy associated with it, like finer things of life and marriage. Even it can also be a marriage bed as a symbol. So it's usually pretty good. And Uttra Falguni besides pleasure and enjoyment and relaxation, it has this notion of having some sort of purpose. Okay. The thing though is that Moon is with Mars and Ketu in the fifth house here of Leo. Okay, Leo is a fixed fire sign. Mars is a fire planet. Ketu is also kind of a fire planet. And Mars and Ketu are, especially when you get them close together, and they're getting closer and closer together, they will cross, as I mentioned, towards the end of the month. You get a very explosive energy. Okay. And then the fifth house relates to creativity, but especially in Leo, it also relates to a stage. And the moon it can represent the mind, the intuitive mind, emotional mind, but also the public. Okay. So this at the beginning, this could be some sort of explosive energy, public explosive energy um, going on here. And so this Uttra Falguni again sounds good for the moon, but when you have these two explosive planets with it, it might actually be the ending or curtailing of pleasure or enjoyment. Hmm. Now, the dasha period for this first chart, and the dasha period is a planetary period. During a dasha period, the planets that are running you can kind of consider them more active or influential during that time. Okay, so we're running Moon, Sun, Rahu, and Venus. So again, we're getting pulled back to this moon energy here on the stage with this sort of combustible energy. Okay, Sun is in the third house, and it is in Ardra Nakshatra. Ardra is symbolized by a storm cloud. And Sun is actually the dispositor or landlord for this fifth house. So, it's not only, so the thing is, this fifth house is not just like Rahu and Ketu are there with the moon, but then the landlord is also like, you know, at least not stable. Let's put it that way, stormy. Okay. So again, that could indicate more issues with fifth house matters, such as children, such as advising, such as romance, these sorts of things. Okay. Rahu is in the 11th house, so it's in the opposite house of the moon. It's in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society, as well as income. So there can be some sort of like ambition towards groups here. And then Venus is in the second house. Second house represents oral speech, communication, as well as family, inner circle. Venus can represent diplomacy. It can also represent, loved ones, social grace, that sort of thing. And Venus is in its own sign, so it's strong. It's swa, we would call it in Sanskrit. But Venus in the second degree is in a nakshatra called Kritika. Kritika is symbolized by Kartikeya, the commander-in-chief of the celestial army. So there's a fighting energy involved here, a victorious energy, but a fighting energy nonetheless. And also, Kritika is a dual nakshatra because in addition to Kartikeya, energies associated with Kritika are actually like a foster mother energy because Kartikeya was raised by several foster mothers. So especially when we have Venus here, in Kritika, it's a strong sort of diplomatic way of talking about, fighting, nurturing, and like usually I think of advocating, when I think of Kritika. Okay. So there's some sort of, again, like, and I mentioned, like, it seems like if we look at the charts, the famous charts I'm going to go through, the commonality for all of this is like raising awareness. Okay, and that seems to be happening again on a public stage, maybe in an explosive way. And the explosive way, hopefully, is not actually physical, but like when you have Mars and K2 together, you can get like technology. Okay, so that might be internet, for example. Yeah, but it's Leo there, so high level. Um, this could even be like a I say like I keep thinking like rock and roll music for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why, but yeah, but you get the point here. Yeah, so clubs, groups, and society bringing like this kind of explosive energy to the public, and advocating. Okay. And so, especially with this Venus in the second house of family, like there's can be concerns or loss of family, also authority, involved here. The sun represents like a high level of authority, such as a president or a king. Okay. Um, yeah. So, and then Moon and Venus are also the two emotional planets. So we have something quite emotional going on here related to ambition towards clubs and groups of people. But it looks like the um, kind of stage or venue and also leadership, because the sun and Ardra, Jupiter's pretty close to it. Jupiter and Sun are both in this Ardra, storm cloud energy, and they're both aspecting the ninth house of government authority. Jupiter at this particular moment is combo, so you can't see it. So, and we've been in this energy since early June. So, Jupiter represents things like balance, fairness, justice, children again. So we keep picking up children for some reason. But this could be like, unfairness or injustice related to government or authority or boss or even father, because these things are represented by the ninth house. Okay. And the third house, sun is in the third house. The third house represents nonverbal communication. So this is action. This is stormy, authoritative action taken by a leader that may not be the most balanced or fair or even lawful, frankly. Luckily, as I mentioned, Jupiter is leaving combustion on July 9th. So hopefully that'll help bring things back into order. And then also, I think within the next 24 hours of this recording, which is July 1st, Sun is moving out of this Ardra energy, out of the storm cloud energy, into Punarvasu. Punarvasu is still a bit sharp because the symbol of that is a quiver of arrows, which is a weapon with a pointy, sharp, tip. Um, but it's more of this sort of cycling energy because the arrows, they sit on your back in the little box, and then you shoot one off and then maybe go retrieve it, bring it back, put it back in the box. So there's this kind of cycling energy. So this is like a leader going back and forth, potentially advocating in a very, if not violent way or explosive way, a very, what do I say, unusual way. Because K2, the south node of the moon, represents like, and Rahu as well, they represent hidden, unexpected, unusual energy. Okay. So, yeah, that's what we have going on there. We have a bunch of yogas in this chart. We have solar and lunar yogas, kahala sarpa, that will bring support. Kahala sarpa yoga will bring ambition. Pravraja yoga, that's the three planets in the fifth house, Mars, Moon, K2, that brings a life focus. So again, there's something, related to, again, probably children, because we keep coming back to the fifth house and then Jupiter's combust. And we're picking up Jupiter because it's conjoined with the sun. And they're both aspecting the ninth house. So there's also a Chandra Mangala yoga here. So that's, about property and wealth. We also have a Parvata yoga here. So, because we have only, and that's a parvata from the text of Brihat Parashara Hora, if you follow along with the Shastra classical text of Jyotish. But that's only positive planets in the four kendras and then the eighth house. So that brings leadership. Okay, so there could be something involved here relating public upset or losses, some outburst or destructive outburst, advocating something very emotional here related to family and home. Some sort of unfair, tumultuous government actions seem to be, involved here. Okay. Then, second chart here, July 31st, you can see some stuff is, some things have changed. Venus has shifted, Sun has shifted, Mars is shifting, Moon is shifted, but 4 out of 9 planets are more or less in the same spot. They haven't changed too much. So yeah, so what do we have now? Well, at least Mars has finally crossed K2, and the thing is, when Mars does cross K2, that might really be the sort of, flashpoint or tipping point of things really getting hot and heavy and really being explosive. And they already have been. I mean, ever since Mars entered Leo, things have gotten pretty intense. And then also Mars entered Leo and then Jupiter went combust. And then, like we had United States bombing Iran and Iran bombing a military base in Qatar. And then now, was it, at least they said one day that trade talks, negotiations between Canada and the United States had stopped, but then there was like a last minute stopping back, or so it's been fairly chaotic with a lot of high level politics, governments, authorities, like we would see here, like all this explosive energy in the fifth house that could be like again, and also picking up Sun and the ninth house. It's high level government authorities like duking it out essentially. So, and some of them literally using bombs and things like drones. Like drones could be like Mars and K2. Mars can be machines, and K2 can be like technology. So, like technical machines like drones, which is kind of a big thing these days in military warfare. And Mars can represent military and violence, and kind of like physical actions. So again, the second chart. Now the moon in the second chart is on Swati, so that's kind of interesting because that's a very different position from where it was when it was sandwiched in between Mars and K2, that explosive energy. Now moon is on its own, so it's probably getting a little more rest, frankly. Not as upset and tumultuous as it was at the beginning of the month. And Swati is represented by new growing grass blowing in the wind. So it's this sort of like fragile beginning type energy. Okay, coming out here. The thing though is that Swati, as I've mentioned several times in my videos, whenever I see people with important placements on Swati, they can like visibly be like a nervous type person, like a lot of anxiety, a lot of nerves, like sometimes literally even shaking, like new grass blowing in the wind. And so since the moon is aspecting the lugna here, it's like a nervous public type of, a nervous public for some reason. Okay. So luckily Mars and K2 are no longer together, but the thing is Mars is now in the sixth house of enemies, and Mars represents enemies. And Mars is aspecting the lugna, which it owns. So this means it's going to bring strength to the chart, or bring strength to the chart, or bring strength to the whole kind of physicality and personality of somebody, emotionality of somebody. But the thing is, Mars aspecting Aries can bring like a very active, very aggressive type of actions, and even potentially speech, but more actions typically. So we have this sort of nervous mind in the Lugna energy coming from the moon, and we have this sort of aggressive energy coming from the sixth house. And the sixth house also represents, besides enemies, like acute issues such as accidents, injuries, and infections, which Mars can represent those things as well because it's a fire planet. Um, so yeah, this could be some sort of, again, public um, again, injury or accident or nervousness about it, at least, if not it actually happening. Then the Dasha period for the second chart is Rahu, Saturn, Saturn, Venus. Well, we're still picking up this Venus energy, and Venus is no longer so strong. Because even though Venus, we were picking up Venus energy in the first house, and it was strong because it was in its own sign, it did have an aspect from Saturn on it coming from the 12th house. The 12th house represents losses and expenditures, and Saturn represents delays, obstacles, long-term chronic problems, structural issues, history, as well as can be even death potentially. So, and Saturn is in the nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapada. So Uttara Bhadrapada is symbolized by the back like the funeral pyre. So again, flames and transformation and things turning to ash. Luckily, with Uttara Bhadrapada, there's some notion of surrendering to the chaos or starting to be objective and bring order back to the chaos. But the thing is, you can see in the second chart, the line under Saturn means that it's going retrograde. So Saturn's going to back up from Uttara Bhadrapada into Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada is the front legs of a funeral pyre, so it's all that destruction and transformation, but without the sense of like objectivity. Okay, and Saturn is aspecting the second house of families, of speech, of inner circle, of assets. Okay, and the thing is, Saturn is the lord of the 10th house of 9 to 5 work. And daily activity, and also the 11th house of income, clubs, groups, and society. So there can be losses through employment and losses through groups and losses of income, which we're picking up twice over here. And then also Rahu's pointing towards the 11th house. So again, clubs, groups, society, income. It could also be gambling as well. So there might be some, unusual kind of move in a direction, because Rahu represents kind of a hidden, unexpected, but ambitious move, potentially, or energy. With that being in the 11th house, that could be like some sort of, I don't know, it could be a gambling mood, especially because Jupiter's aspecting there, and Jupiter can literally represent like the stock market or finance. So there might be some sort of financial gamble going on here. But Rahu, Jupiter is an Ardra nakshatra still at the end of the month. So there's this, and this Ardra nakshatra is not only symbolized by a storm cloud, and the drop of water from that, but a drop of water related to like tears. So there can be sadness related to some financial gamble that happened here, especially because Rahu is in the Purva Bhadrapada energy, so the funeral pyre energy. So it could be like some financial gamble that really didn't pay out, and maybe there was huge losses from it. Yeah. And Rahu again with that hidden energy might be like, something that looked good, but like ultimately it was like nothing, insignificant, almost like a scam type of energy. Yeah. So, and then the Saturn is aspecting the second house still, but Venus is no longer there to protect the second house. So then you might not only get hits to income and groups and society and work, but assets and inner circle there. Yeah. So yeah, and Saturn is also aspecting the ninth house of authority, government, that sort of thing. So we're still picking up ninth house authority energy here, as well as loss of families and groups here. So yeah, this might be sort of the start of more action based off of like Mars crossing KT, like again, this flashpoint of some kind that's happening towards the end of the month. So there are a bunch of yogas in the second chart as well. Again, solar lunar yoga, so some support. There's also Buddha Ditya yoga, so that's like an intelligence combination. There's also Balarishta yoga here, so it's 4 planets and negative houses. That brings also like a very fragile, if not precarious beginning, and we're already picking up the Swati energy that the moon is in. So again, some kind of new development here is happening, both physically and mentally, emotionally, in the world. And then also Venus is bhavam, so the second lord has gone the second house, or 2 houses away, and so that's going to be one communication after another. potentially, or one family or close, friend like family member after another who's having difficulty. The moon is also bhavat bhavam because it's lord of the fourth house and it's gone 4 houses away. So this could be like one, again, partner after another, one emotional, I would even say hit after another, because the lord of the seventh house is this Venus, which is now also in Ardra energy, bringing like storm cloud energy to the seventh house of like spouse, like partner, and business partners as well. Yeah, and then again, Moon is fragile because it's in Swati. So again, the two emotional planets, Venus and Moon, are not in the strongest position. But at least potentially Jupiter is with Venus. So at least the storm cloud energy that's happening here, at least the better sides of storm cloud energy, which can be transformation, which could be clearing out old stuff that's preventing healing, which can be diplomacy. And again, the diplomacy may be happening in like a written form because we're in the third house, not the second house. But this could be like one talk after another, trying to find some suitable response to, again, it looks like some sort of difficult moment here. So again, difficult beginnings, issues with family still, multiple stormy communications and relationships going on, continuous strong actions and emotion, that's the lugna, stormy destructive authority advice. Yeah, because again, we have Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada aspecting the ninth house of authority. We have Venus and Jupiter, the two counselors. Venus, the worldly counselor, and Jupiter, the spiritual counselor, both in Ardra, aspecting the ninth house. And then Mars, which is, again, coming from the sixth house, aspecting as well. So this is like, the ninth house is also like a Sagittarius, which is a dual fire sign. So there's some action, dual action by authorities to, um, it looks like find some solution, through some stormy advice related to losses through enemies. This could also be problems with property. We have Saturn aspect in the second half as assets, but the two property planets, Bhumikarak, as we call them in Sanskrit, Mars is in a negative house, the sixth house, and Saturn is in the 12th house. So there can be like property losses here going on. But there is some strength because at least Mars is aspecting its own sign, but that's a pretty aggressive type of strength. It's not, there might be, again, some written communication type strength, but Venus and Jupiter are still in Ardra. So it's still, might be advice that's, sudden, unusual, stormy. Yeah, so. Okay, so that's how things are changing in the sky. So let's see what else we got here. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the different planets, talk about them, and then interspersed, I'll be talking about different famous charts. And the famous charts I pulled for this talk have a similar sky pattern to what we're currently experiencing. So the reason why I do that is so that you can see through different famous charts how these energies embody in like real life, as opposed to this just all being like some real abstract exercise or something like that. So on this slide, I'm talking about Surya, Sun, and Mangal or Mars, the two fire planets, also two leadership planets. Sun represents things like the president or king. Mars represents like the CEO or commander-in-chief of the army. So somebody who's a little bit more like literally, can be literally on the ground or in the trenches, rolling their sleeves up and getting involved in leadership that way. So July 5th, Sun enters Purnarvasi Nakshatra. So as I mentioned, that's that quiver of arrows energy. So we're moving out of that storm cloud energy into Purnarvasi, which is still sharp, and can still be, have that kind of energy, still a lot of movement, but not quite so, again, stormy. It's a little bit more calculated and controlled. And again, more of a cycling energy rather than like a storm passes through and then the energy clears type energy. This is more like a going back and forth. Literally can be even like commuting, traveling like that. So the sun is in currently in Mercury, which is a neutral sign for it. It's also a dual air sign, dosa bhava vayu. So this can be going back and forth between different ideas, authority going back and forth between different ideas. It's conjoined with Jupiter, and Mercury is in Cancer, Karka at this time. So Jupiter again, it's combust, for another week or so, and then it will come back online. So again, this can be like unfair situations, or it could also be like transformation of finances. Jupiter can represent that, or diplomacy, or education, children. Mercury in Cancer. Cancer is, since it's ruled by Moon, is an enemy sign to Mercury, and it's also a movable water sign. So a lot of emotions, and Mercury is the analytical, logical mind planet. So it's like trying to understand or make sense of a lot of emotions here. And Mercury will be in Pusha for a while. So right now it's in more of a Pusha is symbolized by a cow's udder, which is more of a stabilizing, nurturing type of energy. Like a cow that gives milk type energy. But then it's moving into a Shlesha, which is like almost the complete opposite energy to Pusha. Pusha is symbolized by a cow's udder. A Shlesha is symbolized by a snake. So snakes that, they bite and hiss and sneak off, and they're kind of scary to some people. I mean, I don't know, I guess cows can be scary too. There's probably more people afraid of snakes than cows, I'm guessing. So, but Ashleisha has this energy of being sudden, unexpected, but also kind of mesmerizing. Mercury represents things like logical, analytical mind. So this can be like ideas that are like really fascinating, but also Mercury represents speech, writing. So again, that's where we're talking about like bringing awareness. And we'll see as we go through the famous charts that that's pretty common is that the people I'm going to talk about, again, have placements in these areas. And so you can see as I'm talking about this more abstractly, like this is like an advocacy type of energy. We kind of started with like the Venus and Critica, right, with advocacy. But Venus is a much softer energy than Mercury. Mercury can be very sharp and, again, logical and um, not so emotional, even though it's in like, an emotional sign right now. Um, so at least temporarily, this could be like tensions easing, contemplating ideas and decisions, and maybe doing a bit of healing even, from the tensions, like, because we had a really stormy, end of June. So again, there might be a little bit of reprieve before Mars crosses K2. Okay. And then the scene changes quite a bit. So July 16th, Sun enters Cancer, Karka. So Sun will bring energy to Mercury, again, the logical, analytical planet in Cancer. Cancer is a friend sign for Sun, so it does pretty well there. It's a movable water sign, so Charajala. So a lot of emotions going on in Cancer. Conjoined with Mercury, again, a lot of processing emotions, especially from the past. Because the reason why I say that past is because Mercury will be going retrograde. Usually when Mercury goes retrograde, we start, thinking about past things or past people. It was kind of funny, like, it was what, 2, 3 weeks ago, I had a dream about some people I haven't thought about in years probably. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, is Mercury going retrograde? And I looked at my, my astro calendar, and I was like, yep, it's going retrograde. So if you're sensitive to mercurial energy, you might be feeling this already. Usually there's a shadow period, before and after. It's not exactly a hard stop and start, but so yeah, probably a lot of emotional processing from the past. Then July 19th, Sun enters Pusha Nakshatra, which again is that cow's udder, nurturing, stabilizing energy. It's a cow. It's a pretty docile animal. So this should, now by July 19th, this should take the edge off of the Sun, because the Sun, was going through the storm cloud ardra energy and then the Purvasu energy. So maybe finally July 19th or so, the Sun can, chill out a little bit. But what else here? Moon is exalted. But I think about that time we have a full moon. I'm remembering that correctly. Full moon. Yeah, because exalted moon. Yeah, moon must be. So we must be getting that. Must be close to the new moon, and then we're gonna have a swa Venus, and then Jupiter will be Venus and Jupiter, then Swan Cancer. Oh, okay. I remember what this was. So, okay. So, Moon exalted in Taurus. So, what's going to happen is around this time of Sun entering Pusha, Moon, which again is the public, right, and also the emotional mind, it's going to go through Taurus where there's a Venus in its own sign. So, that's going to be really nice and stabilizing and lovey dovey because Venus is going to be in Rohini, which is like a really nice nakshatra. Like, it's like the most attractive, seductive, luscious, pleasant, creative type nakshatra. Really nice. Even like planets that are, natural malefics and Rohini, like when you have Saturn and Rohini, you usually get like sculptors and like a Rodin type sculptor type energy. And I don't remember his chart if I've ever looked at it even, but I would guess somebody like him would have like a Saturn Rokini. So you're going to get this like the most lovely creative energies from Saturn you could get, which is again like sculpting or like architecture type stuff. Anyway, so Moon's going to go through Venus with the it's going to go through Taurus with the Venus. That's going to be pretty nice because Moon is exalted there anyway, so the Moon's going to be strong. Then it's going to go through Gemini where Jupiter's there. It might be get a little bit stormy, but Jupiter's still a natural benefic. That should hold up the Moon a bit. Even though there might be some teardrops, involved about that time. And then Moon is going to come into its own sign. So for, I would say, a good week or so, Moon's going to be pretty strong. And also, Moon represents nurturing and emotionality and stuff. So there's going to be a pretty supportive energy with both Sun and the Moon. So the King and the Queen, the two regents, like two high-level administrators. So again, it looks like there's going to be a bit of reprieve. But then July 22nd, Mars crosses K2, and then things, frankly, might hit the fan. And Mars also crosses Uttar Falguni that same day. So there's also this, besides the instability of Mars and K2 crossing, Mars is also changing nakshatras. That may be okay for a little bit because Mars, Uttar Falguni, the star of Uttar Falguni is Venus, and Venus is going to be Swa for a while. But then at the end of the month, did I say July 31st? Venus enters, no, that's Gemini. So Venus, a few days after this, is going to enter Mrigashirsha, and the star of Mrigashirsha is Mars. So it's almost like Mars is in the star of Venus, which is in the star of Mars. So there's going to be a parivartana of stars between Mars and Venus. So that's going to bring, again, probably some explosive energy, separation, could even be, some sort of disturbing of the peace because this is all happening at Uttar Falguni, the hammock. This is like upsetting the hammock. And it can also be represented by a marriage bed. So this could be, disturbing relationships as well. And as I mentioned, Mars can represent machines and KT technology, so there can be literally some explosive or violent energy happening, or strange, or hidden, unexpected military operations involving machines, technology, drones. That seems to be a big thing these days, high-level management. Unfortunately, right? So, and then July 28th, Mars enters Virgo. So at least Mars is not in the same sign as K2 anymore. That's probably good in a way. The thing that was Virgo is an enemy sign to Mars, and Virgo is like the exact opposite energy of Mars. Mars is a very erratic, rebellious planet, and Virgo is all about, you know, healing and getting things, creating order out of chaos. So they're sort of at odds. The energies are at odds with each other. Virgo or Kanya is a dual earth sign, Joseph Baba Prithvi. So there can literally be like a physical sorting out that's happening here because Mars is a physical planet and Virgo is a earth planet, but it's dual. So it's like we're sorting through physical things. We're sorting through. Mars can represent enemies, or Mars can represent siblings. There's going to be siblings sorting through things. K2 temporarily calms down until Sun enters Leo, which is going to be 16th. So, and then it's going to be more action, with K2, unusual leadership flaring up again, potentially. Because we're going to have Sun, Swan, its own sign of Leo with K2 there. Pretty explosive authority, heads of state going on. And then Mars is going to be aspecting Sagittarius. So Mars is a fire sign aspecting a dual fire sign. It's aspecting Pisces, a dual water sign, and it's aspecting Aries, a movable fire sign. So Mars and Sag, there's going to be dual actions going on. Mars and Aries going to be a lot of first pioneering actions going on. Mars in Pisces, where Saturn is, that's going to be like engineering, which is a little bit odd because Pisces is a dual water sign. So some sort of engineering or could be, again, a military campaign or land related to, oceans, like, or even overseas, because Pisces is related to the 12th house of losses, expenditures, but also overseas isolated places. So, that's potentially some things we can expect towards the end of the month here. Okay, so here we have our first famous chart. This is the chart of Shankara Nair. If you're not familiar with him, he's an Indian lawyer and justice. He was, I think, mostly active in the High Court of Madras. He is quite famous as a lawyer in India because he went up quite as far as he could, really, during the time when India was really more British India at that time. And he got in the good graces of the authorities of that time and was knighted even and became part of a high commission of authorities, legal authorities. But then there was a incident called the Jallianwala Bagh, or a massacre, or also known as the Amritsar massacre, in which there was a Baisakhi festival. Baisakhi is usually a Sikh-related festival of the sun entering Aries, so it's sort of like the solar new year. Um, and they were celebrating this, and there was like a peaceful protest about something, some government policy, and there was this area that was only had one entrance. The three other sides were closed, and you couldn't get in or out except through one entrance. And so people were there to celebrate the New Year. And then the English military showed up and just shot so many people, including young children and women and things like this. And it was a peaceful, festival. So, and then there was an investigation for the military commander in charge of that. I forget his title, but his last name was Dyer. And Shankar Nair was the lawyer who was the lead counsel on that case. So after that happened, before that happened, clearly Shankar Nair decided not to continue hobnobbing with the British authorities, but went to the other side. And then he, after that, basically became a proponent of a free, independent India. So anyway, the reason why he showed up on my radar is there's a relatively new movie that came out called Kesari 2. If you're into Indian or Bollywood movies, Akshay Kumar, I like him a lot. He was the actor in that. Again, historical fiction. I don't think all the details in that movie were true, but at least it gave you some idea of what happened. So anyway, it was a big thing. That I think it's one of those things too, where like at least at the end of the movie, it said that England has never um, uh, fully come forth with its responsibility for what happened um, in Amritsar. So anyway, it might actually still be a thing, unfortunately, never quite resolved, at least emotionally, for people. But anyway, his chart, the reason why I pulled up his chart, though, I mean, even though he's an interesting guy, is that his chart looks a lot like the current sky pattern. So let's take a look here. Okay, so his chart, he was born July 11th, 1857. I don't have a birth time for him. But since I don't have a birth time, this is a moon rising chart for him, or Chandra Lagna. Okay, so moon's at the top. He was born in Coimbatore, India. The Lugna Nakshatra, we don't know because we don't have an exact birth time. The sun was in Punarvasu. So again, that arrow, sharp, pointy arrow traveling back and forth, going back and forth. And the sun also represents career. And you can see for him, he's got all these planets in the 5th house. Okay, and he's got Mars there, Saturn there, Mercury there, Sun there. These are all, well, Mercury is sometimes a natural benefic planet, but with all these natural malefics, this is 4 natural malefics in the 5th house here of a stage. And that's what he did as a lawyer, right? So, and this is all in Gemini. So Mercury is in its own sign. Gemini is a dual air sign, so dual ideas, so debating potentially or sorting through ideas. Mars is there, action. Saturn is like endurance, and then the sun. So his career is about an endurance career of sorting through ideas and speech and speaking on these things. Yeah, and also this 5th house is advice. This can be like sorting through bureaucratic laws, at the government level for high-level authorities. Could be that, yeah. So the moon nakshatra it was probably in Shatabisha. At least it was most of the day until like 2011 in the evening. Shatabisha can bring like a very kind of an abstract energy. Like the symbol of Shatabisha is a circle, as opposed to like a cow or a snake. It's like a very kind of abstract. It can be like almost like a NASA scientist type energy. Okay, so his mind is very fixed because it's a fixed air sign. This is Aquarius we're talking about, Shatabisha, but very philosophical here. This person. Okay, if not Shatabisha, then Purvabhadrapada, which again is a very destructive energy. So I'm guessing for him, if his moon was in Purvabhadrapada, he would probably be a lot more disturbed than it seems like he is here. In Shatabisha. I mean, he must have been pretty high functioning, to do what he did. So, yeah. So, but you could see, like, with the moon in Aquarius, in Shatabisha, there's somebody, a very abstract thinker, again, potentially, but also somebody who has a very fixed mind, like somehow, despite him sorting through all these ideas. And again, it's sort of, there's an art to law, right? I mean, it's like you're just sort of arguing points, and then like even in the movie, I think they were talking about, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about who wins. And this Mars and Saturn together, this can be engineering. So this could be like engineering arguments and idea for the government, which essentially is, what they base their laws on typically, right? Um, So yeah, and then let's see, the day lord Venus or probably Saturn. Venus was early in the day, or Saturn. Saturn again can be like bureaucracy, which he clearly was a part of. The Hurrah Lord, our Lord, we don't know because we don't have exact birth time. The bird shot probably Rahu. Most of the day it was Rahu while it was in Shatavisha, but then after 2011. It would have been Jupiter. Either way, Rahu is ambition and Jupiter's law. So either way, it makes sense. So his chart recreates the current sky pattern. He has Venus in Taurus. He has Sun in Gemini and Punarvasu specifically. He also has Sun aspecting Sagittarius, which it's also doing. And then he has Saturn aspecting Leo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So Saturn in those 3 signs, constellations. And also, he has Mars and Ketu, this explosive energy in his 8th house. So the other thing that reminded me of this chart, besides the current sky pattern, was I did actually go through the Beatles, like that's rock and roll singing group. I analyzed the chart for their first U.S. concert. If you want to check that out, that's in my Transit Gochara May 2024 video. But there was a very similar energy where there are all these planets in the 5th house again of a stage. And if I remember correctly, Mars and Saturn were both combust, which they are here. And again, Mars and Saturn are 2 natural malefic planets. And when they're combust, that means that like you're not going to see their outward effects, external effects so much. So, like, that's the reason why this Beatles' first US concert was so, like, it just blew up for them, and blew up their popularity, because these two natural malefics were not seen. There were a lot of internal problems, which is ultimately what caused the demise of the group, of the singing group. But for that particular moment in that concert, it went bonkers, for the group. And so, he has this kind of a similar pattern to this Beatles' first US concert. So anyway, if you want to take a look at, as another comparison, you can. But let's go through house by house. So again, Aquarius or Kumbha rising chart here, fixed air sign, Sthira Vayu. The moon probably in Shatabisha, if not Purva Bhadrapada. Fixed mind, on the public. So he's a public do-gooder. What's interesting though is similarities between Shatabisha and Purva Bhadrapada. Like the book I have is like one is harsh in speech but truthful, where there would be more like a welfare of the masses type of energy. And then the second one's harsh words but skilled speaker. Either way, you can see there's like, at least in terms of speech, some pretty strong energies here. And the second one would be more fanatical. So, again, I think he's more of a welfare of the masses type of guy rather than a fanatical, although he was probably made more fanatical later on, once he decided to, be on the side of ending the British Raj. So yeah, so I'm guessing he was probably a Moon and Shatabisha guy. But anyway, the Lagnatia, the ruling planet for the chart is Saturn. It's gone to the fifth house. Fifth house is a Dharmasthana, house of duty. Very strong notion of duty here for this gentleman. We have a Swan Mercury in that chart, in that house as well. Columbus, Mars, and Ardra. So very stormy, violent, action here, fighting going on here, which is essentially what he is. Very strong Mercury, so very strong words, but like underneath that, he's got a combust Mars and combust Saturn. This is like constructing, like blitzkrieg, stormy type of arguments and ideas and words as a profession. And going back and forth between, he's like going back and forth between, constructing these arguments is essentially what he does, right? Um, and it can also even be like listening to arguments because Mercury represents hearing and ears. So, as a judge, he was listening to people going back and forth. As a lawyer, he was creating the arguments, and as justice, he was sorting through them and listening to people. So all this together, skilled electric speaker, again, Ardra, electricity, speaking, Mercury, Swa, intelligent, there's a Buddha Ditya Yoga here, combination giving intelligence and insight, you know, sharp, focused, you know, um, pretty, like rock star energy. That's what this kept giving me, is like rock star energy. I think that might also be why I was thinking of like the Beatles' first US concert, if you want to check that out. Um, yeah, this is like rock star, this type of energy. Literally, like, with the Ardra and Mars and Saturn, it's a physical, electrical, type of thing. And the sun, the two fire planets there. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But also debating, yeah, going back and forth with these ideas, fighter, leader, tenacious, because he's, his Saturn, his ruling planet, is backed by all this fire of Mars and Sun. Sun and Punarvasi, the arrow energy, and then Mars and the storm cloud energy. I mean, that's a lot of like hardcore energy, you know, um, backing him up. But the thing is, because he's got this Mars and Saturn combust, you know, on the surface, he's going to seem much more polished and refined and well mannered than internally what he's got going on. Besides, he's got this Mars and Ketu in the eighth house of deep psychology, which is a very rebellious, explosive energy for the deep mind. Yeah. So I was like, wow, he's got an intense chart, this guy. So tenacious, engineer, advisor, on stage again, rockstar energy here. He's got this pravraja yoga, 4 planets in one house. That's a focus yoga for fifth house matters, which is advising and education. He was also, as on that high level commission, he was the education person on that panel, government panel. Yeah, so there's also two pancha maha purusha yogas here. He's got a swa Venus and then he's got a swa Mercury here. Very strong. Pancha maha purusha yoga brings strength and power. He's got a solar yoga here. The swa Venus in the 12th house from the sun will bring a lot of, again, speech, speech and eloquence and power. So he might have a Lakshmi yoga. I have a question mark here because usually Lakshmi yoga, what you do is you look at the ninth house lord, is it strong, which it is, and then you look at, is it Venus strong, and actually the ninth lord is Venus. So he might have a Lakshmi yoga here, or you could look at ninth lord strong, is the Lugna strong, and the Lugna indirectly is strong. It combusts and it's in front sign, but it's got this really strong disposer of a Swa Mercury. So Lakshmi yogas bring wealth, which I think he was pretty well off, at least for a while. And then what else does he have? He also has a Sri Nanth yoga, so that is ninth lord strong, which is a Swa Venus, and then Venus strong since it's already Swa, and then Mercury Swa. So Sri Nanth yoga is a spirituality yoga. So that might also be why he gave up all of his worldly claim and, accolades from the British Raj and said, forget all this. I'm going to do what fight for justice and what I think is right for the public. So he gave all that up. And then he has a kahala sarpa yoga. That's ambition. All the planets on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis of the other. Buddhadicha yoga. Sun and Mercury in the same sign. Especially when it relates to the first, second, or fifth house, which he has there. He also has a parvata yoga. So the lugnatia of the chart is Saturn, and Saturn is sitting, its disposer or landlord is Mercury, and Mercury is Swa. So Saturn has a very strong landlord, and that also gives him power, and especially regarding leadership. So yeah, life, focus, strength, power, support, wealth, spirituality, ambition, intelligence, leadership. It's like, wow, that's a lot of energy. And luckily he, I think for the most part, used it for good purposes, And again, he was the Attorney General or Justice of the High Court of Madras with all this. So his other houses, second house lord is Jupiter and Bharani. So birthing, Bharani is symbolized by a womb. This is birthing law here, law and justice. Speaking law and justice. Rahu is there. Rahu is in Uccha Bhadrapada. So again, bringing order to chaos. Rahu is also an ambitious energy, but also a bit of a, kind of hidden energy there. And then it's aspected by Saturn. So, again, there's like and it's all in Pisces, a dual water sign. So speaking, in an ambitious way, in an emotional way, like swaying the emotions of people to uh, structure the law, basically. Or according to the structure of the law, I guess you could say. I think he was on both sides. I think he created laws, but also abided by laws, I guess depending on the day and what he was looking at. So ambition, speech, dual emotion, order, and chaos, cycling, again. Then the third house lord is Mars. There's a bhavam, Jupiter there. So that's like one speech after another, one communication after another. So all the speaking, and also Jupiter's planet representing publishing, and it's in the third house of non-oral communication. This is speaking and writing, like nonstop about all this stuff. And then Jupiter is in Bharani. So again, writing about new laws, writing about justice. So again, once he got into the more political activist side. So yeah, then the fourth house, fourth lord, we have a Swa Digbala Venus. I mean, this is a massive Venus here, and Rohini nonetheless. So again, that's, attractive, seductive type of nakshatra, lunar mansion. Digbala is directional strength, and this is a massively strong Venus. And that's why this massively strong Venus is not only the lord of his fourth house of home and family lineage, and he did come from a, well-to-do family, but, this massively strong Venus is the lord of his the ninth house of government and, higher education and spirituality as well. And then he has Jupiter aspecting the ninth house. Jupiter represents Saul. This is like higher education and law. Yeah, so what else do we have? Yeah. So this fourth house, just to finish up, so cultivate the arts and home, it's a very educated home. But also he got his degree in the arts before he went on to his law degree. Fifth house lord is a swan Mercury, and you have a bhavat Mars also. So this is Mars is the lord of the third house. So it's like one writing after another on stage, like speaking about it, engineering these, logical arguments, and ideas, and then these other planets here. So this is all being done on stage, meaning like the court. And then I would think, with all these planets in the fifth house, there would be a bunch of children, and he did actually have six kids, so that makes sense. Sixth house lord is Moon, and again, Moon is gone, isn't probably shot to be shot. So, and the sixth house is like acute issues, also the public, also emotions and enemies. So this could be, public enemies that are difficult, and a mind or public, difficult healing the mind of the public. Especially if we're talking about that like Amritsar massacre situation. I mean, it's might still be unresolved. Long after this guy has passed, it's still not resolved. So, what else do we have here? Then the seventh house, Lord is Sun, aspected by Moon, Jupiter, Saturn. So the fifth house, again, this is all in Leo. These are high level partners and public law, also red tape, I would say. You know, yeah. And then the eighth house Lord is Mercury. K2s are in Utra Falguni, so again, rejecting, enjoyment here, aspected by Mars. Aggressive, very alternative mindsets, unusual thought process by this guy. Enjoyment with a purpose. So, like his, you know, truth busting, thought busting type of approach, he enjoyed it. It gave him a sense of purpose, but clearly a deep rebellious, you know, streak to this guy. And there's this like, book, the system energy, especially once this gets activated. I didn't look at that, but I would guess that, when he was running K2 Mars or Mercury, that's when we started probably going into the eighth house more, and the eighth house energy of just, um, non-conventional, non-conventional roads, essentially, bucking the system. So then the ninth house lord is Venus. Super strong. We talked about that aspect by Jupiter. So this is birthing, grounded, art of law, government, justice, all his, high level, judicial activities. There you go. And then the 10th house lord is Mars, aspected by the strong Venus. And that's also in Scorpio. So it's the art of transformation, that we've got going on there. Then the 11th house lord is Jupiter, it aspects his own sign, plus four other planets coming from the fifth house. And this is all in Sagittarius. So dual philosophical fight, thought leader for group, various groups. Then the 12th house lord is Saturn, as aspected by Mars, where it's exalted. So this is strong hidden enemies. I'm sure with, all of this, I mean, besides the British Raj, being probably a hidden enemy for a while that he didn't necessarily suss out. He was sort of going along with that program for a while until his eyes were opened to what was really going on the ground floor for a lot of, Indians at the time, and then he switched sides. So, yeah. So anyway, a pretty interesting guy, a very interesting chart, but you can see, quite a bit of intensity here, and also advocacy. Yeah. So, again, one of these people who's very much into bringing awareness to different, justice issues. All right, so we've talked about them a little bit, but let's go into a bit more detail about Mercury, or Buddha in Sanskrit, and Venus, or Shukra in Sanskrit. On July 6th, Mercury enters Ashlesha nakshatra. That's snake energy. And Saturn is a direct aspect on Venus. So again, that's when it might also kind of, Saturn again is obstacles and delays, but also structure. So this might kind of throw a curveball into all these nice diplomatic potentially even like romantic feelings we got going on here. Um, and then Mercury again is in Cancer, so it's a movable water sign. So again, a lot of mental processing, health, healing. But again, this Shalesha snake energy, we have Mercury there, so this could be sharp, unexpected words. So this might be like a conversation or some heated, unexpected words that unfortunately may impact our relationships or diplomacy here. Yeah, what do I have? Restructuring relationship. Venus also represents creative projects and advocacy efforts. Like I mentioned, Venus is going to be in Critica for a while. That dual fighting and nurturing energy, fostering energy. July 8th, Venus enters Rohini Nakshatra, so that should be pretty nice for a while. A prime time for arts, creativity, romance, travel, all the nice goody goodies that Venus represents. Um, and then the thing that was there might be a little bit of a delay because Saturn is going to be aspecting all this, so that might slow down this a bit. But Saturn's going retrograde. So with Saturn retrograde on Venus, this might be like someone from the past who kind of shows up, or it could even be like being fairly nostalgic, because Saturn represents history in the past. So there might be some of that going on. Then July 18th, Mercury goes retrograde or vakri. So usually, when I go through Mercury retrograde, like I mentioned, like I had that dream a few weeks ago about people I haven't thought about in a long time. So for me, I always know Mercury retrograde is happening or will soon because random people from the past show up. Like they'll email me or call me, or I'll see them at the grocery store. And like the dream happened. It's kind of a wild time. So um, also I've noticed like when Mercury goes retrograde, old habits return. Like, I tend to, eat foods that I haven't eaten in a while, and I'm like, "Why am I even eating this? I don't really eat this anymore," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's Mercury retrograde." So, redoing things over and over, like, I've done things like going to the grocery store, and then I forgot my wallet or something at home, so I have to go back, get it, and come back to the store, which is not something I typically do. There can be processing issues as well. And again, so you want to be careful about details. So, you don't need to be afraid of Mercury retrograde. And actually, in Vedic astrology, when planets are retrograde, that means they're stronger. So they're more influential. But just might want to take your foot off the brake and not, fly through this period. So to avoid, silly mistakes over potentially minutia, really tiny details. July 20th, Venus enters Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. So Mrigashirsha is about, the symbol of that is a deer's head. So it's all about like that gentle creature wandering through the forest and kind of seeking and searching and sniffing around. So there can be, I would imagine, there's like this might be like a loved one traveling, frankly, and traveling and romance or even creativity related to that. Venus or Mrigashirsha can also be related to like marketing and sales. So this might be related to well, especially more marketing, like finding new outlets, So with Venus there, this might be finding new outlets for creative activities or, partnerships or whatever. Um, July 25th, Mercury goes combust or asta, and that same day, Venus enters Gemini or Mithuna. So with Mercury going combust, again, the outer manifestations of Mercury, like communication and thinking, might be less obvious. But for a while, Mercury's going to be during the month, Mercury's either going to be in Pusha, which is stabilizing, nurturing energy, or it's going to be in Ashlesha. And even though there might be some sharp words that come out of this or sharp ideas, but snake energy can also represent healing. So this might be words that heal or thoughts that heal. The other thing is that Ashlesha Nakshatra, the ruling star of that, is Mercury. So through its own star, by being in its own star, actually Mercury is swa, so Mercury will be quite strong. Um, so there might be again more inner healing thoughts, self dialogue, maybe less communication outward. And then with Venus enters Gemini again, that's a dual air sign. It's a friend sign to Venus, so it's going to be pretty strong. Not as strong as it was in its own sign, but still not too bad. And then but we're bringing this like, romance and finer things of life energy, social grace energy of Venus to dual ideas. So this could be considering, various beautiful, creative, intellectual ideas here. Um, or it could be like, beautiful writing, like literally it could be like penmanship, like really nice calligraphy or something. But it could also be like the art of words or the art of thoughts or something like that, or like like people who like create crossword puzzles, that kind of energy. So the 29th of July, Mercury enters Pusha Nakshatra. So um let me just double check that for a second. Hold on. I just wanted to double check because I was like, wait, why is Mercury in Pusha? It was in, it's going backwards. I'm like, exactly right. Mercury's going retrograde. So anyway, I had it right. I thought maybe I had messed it up, but no, it's actually exactly what Mercury retrograde is. Getting caught up in details and getting a bit confused. So, um, yeah. So anyway, July 29th, Mercury re-enters Pusha Nakshatra. So again, that's going to create some more mental stability, nurturing, probably even healing words and things like that, the healing ideas. And then July 31st, Venus enters Ardra Nakshatra. So this might be, stormy times for relationships, heading into August here. Because again, Ardra is that storm cloud energy, which can be transformational, but it's usually like, blowing in like a hurricane. And also, again, sadness tends to be related to Ardra and psychology. But the thing is, Ardra, when Venus is in Ardra, you might have digital arts or art creative endeavors related to electricity or an art that's related to transformation. So, it's not necessarily all bad. So yeah, I would think like digital art and relationships. So also Venus, like loved one, Ardra, this might be like communicating with a loved one or romantic interest through digital or electronic means like the phone or, whatever, Zoom or, texting or something like that. Especially if, well, they were traveling, so there might be yeah, something might be going on there. Okay, so second famous chart. This is a chart of Nelson Mandela, who was the president of South Africa, and he was an anti-apartheid activist. So again, we're getting more activist energy here. Again, bringing awareness to issues. Apartheid. If you're not familiar, it's like a kind of a systemic, racially biased legal situation in South Africa that really devastated a lot of people there. Anyway, just a little backstory on him, but we'll see it in the chart here. Is that he was in prison for 27 years for government sabotage, and that was that was from 1962 to 1990, which was when he was probably running K2 Venus. So this chart here, just to back up a little bit, is his sun rising chart, his Surya Lagna, because I didn't have an exact birth time. And if he was in prison for 27 years, K2 is literally 7 years and Venus is 20 years. So together, and you can see they're together in the 11th house here. If if that's the case, I'm guessing he isn't like his Udaya Lagna or his sign rising chart isn't Cancer like what we're seeing here, but it's Gemini. Because if he was a Gemini rising chart, Udaya Lagna, then Venus and Ketu would be in the 12th house of losses, expenditures, and isolated places such as prisons. So, I'm guessing he was probably a Gemini Lagna just from that. But yeah. So anyway, let's look at his chart. He's another pretty interesting guy. So he was born 18 July 1918. Birth time I don't know, and Mavzo, I don't know how to pronounce that. South Africa. And again, this is a sun rising chart, Surya Lagna. So Lagna Nakshatra, I don't know because I don't have a birth time. The Sun Nakshatra, again, Sun is in Punarvasu, that, arrow, sharp arrow going back and forth energy. Okay. The Moon Nakshatra, for the most part, up until 23:05 p.m., was in Vishaka. So that's kind of a hardcore energy. Vishaka is a victory energy, has a victory energy associated with it, but it was like victory at all costs. So this guy was pretty hardcore, intense political activist. Even when he was in prison for 27 years, which is pretty amazing. So, um, yeah, the day lord, again, from 4:55 a.m. was Jupiter, which makes sense because, again, we'd be talking about, at least in this chart, Jupiter is the ruler of the ninth house of government, authority, and then also law. And he did go to law school, had some legal training. The Hurrah Lord, I don't know because I don't have an exact part time. Birth dasha, for the most part, was Jupiter. So again, we keep picking up, Jupiter. So not only law, but legal stuff, also speech. And again, for him, it was the ruler of his sixth house of enemies, and also 12th house of, government authority, which may have been actually the one and the same. So we keep picking that up. Anyway, his chart recreates the current sky pattern. Sun and Mercury in Cancer. So again, they're a little bit further along than Nayar's chart. And Mars is in Virgo, which it will be at the end of the month. Jupiter is in Gemini, which it is currently. Venus is in Taurus, which it is currently. And we do actually have Mars and K2 energy together in Virgo here because of the aspect of K2. Okay. And what was interesting is, so we've been talking about Punarvasu. We have Sun there, right at the top, and we have Saturn and Mercury together in Ashlesha. So in this, snake energy, mesmerizing snake energy. Now, the Sun, Saturn, Mercury, does this look like Nayar's chart? Kind of. I mean, it's in a different house, but for him, Sun, Mars, Saturn, Mercury were in Gemini, and for this gentleman, Sun, Saturn, Mercury, and Cancer. So more emotional, probably less objective than Nayar, but it's similar kind of energy here. Um, and again, Mercury being in Ashlesha, it's strong here. It has Digbala directional strength, but it's also Swa through its star. It's Tara, which the star of Ashlesha is Mercury, so Mercury is in its own star. So when you have these two planets, Saturn and Mercury, in Ashlesha, this is going to be a lot of mesmerizing activity, a mesmerizing leader here. And the Sun is the lord of the second house of oral communication, and Mercury is the lord of the third house of non-oral communication. And the other thing that's different is that in Nayar's chart, Mars and Saturn were combust, so you wouldn't see the outer manifestations of those signs. But here, Saturn is not combust and Mars is not combust. And if you look at the third house here, you have Mars, Saturn is aspecting, K2 is aspecting as well. I mean, this is a lot of physical effort here. And part of his, during his prison sentence, initially, they had him just literally, I think, trying to break up rock. This very intelligent, educated political activist. Just basically try to physically break him and then also that's also something that was very interesting is that, especially in the beginning, he was only allowed one letter and or visit every 6 months. So they put him, and he wasn't allowed to read newspapers. He would get in trouble if he snuck in different newspaper clippings, and he would get in trouble for that. So this is pretty amazing. I mean, that this guy is isolated in prison, in South Africa, and still he became famous. That blew me away. I mean, even, in prison, in a cell, on a straw mat, away from newspapers and, not communicating, somehow this guy became famous. And before he was released from prison in 1988, there was a concert in London on his behalf. So that's what I mean, I was, again, it's sort of shocking because in this day and age, anybody can become famous. You could start your whatever social media and then, go viral and blah, blah, blah. But when he's literally not even in physical communication with people, back in the day, before all the internet stuff started, I mean, that kind of blew me away. But it makes sense because of his, planets here. But the reason why I'm bringing all this up is that, at the bottom here, underneath this chart, the very last two lines, it says, and I was getting this from his Wikipedia page, it's quote, described by biographer Mary Benson as a born mass leader who could not help magnetizing people. And I was like, there you go. Yeah, that's like Mercury and Ashlesha, and that snake energy, like just somebody who just capture people with his words. I mean, that's pretty amazing. It's just the word for word. I couldn't stop laughing because it was just so right on, even from his chart. So let's go through house by house and see what we got here. Again, this is a Surya Lugna, sun rising chart, Cancer, Karka, Lugna, rising sign, movable water sign. A lot of emotion here, very emotional guy. Although clearly very detached at the same time. I mean, he's got kind of the same thing going on as Nair has, where he's got Sun, Saturn, Mercury in this fourth house. So he was able to suppress these emotions or maybe redirect them in more of a logical, detached way. At different points, because I think he was a peaceful guy in the beginning, and then he was advocating for violent actions, and then he went back to being peaceful again, more on the side of advocating peace and reconciliation. So, and that could be the Mercury, because Mercury is a dual sign. He could be going back and forth, potentially. But again, I think that might be because I'm guessing he's probably a Gemini rising, in which case he would have the dual ideas here. The other thing is Jupiter in his chart is an Ardra. So sadness, sadness related to law. Yeah. So, okay, so Sun, Punarvasu, and then not only that, but this Saturn and Mercury are in planetary war. So, and Mercury is swath through its star, and it also has directional strength Digbala here. So, and this is both in a Shlesha. So this is like, duking it out, fighting, with snakes of bureaucracy. I mean, you could literally see it that way. I mean, I'm just using the words that these, plants represent, but you can see how this like could play out, right? So, and then the other thing is Saturn is lord of the seventh house here. So he's going to have friends who are going to bring attention to these matters that he's, protesting in South Africa through various means. And Saturn is also lord of the ninth house, which is like scandals and corruption, controversy. So he's a controversial figure. He always was. Like even as a kid, I guess they called him a troublemaker. And then the other thing is Mercury is lord of the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So, Jupiter can represent literally people. So this is, losses through sad people, losses through sad law. It can also be charity, which he did start his own foundation later in his life. I think it was more focused on poverty and HIV/AIDS and stuff like that. But Mercury also in this chart is related to the third house, is the lord of the third house. So the third house represents siblings and neighbors. And with this, again, this, really hardcore Saturn, Mars, K2 mix in the third house. And Mars is also Karko Bhavanasha, which is Mars, the planet representing siblings, and the house representing siblings. This is going to give trouble with siblings. And I think this just means sort of like brotherly people, not literally biological siblings, although it might be. But this is like, his neighbors, basically getting tossed around and, physically harmed. Okay, and he also he was actually, I know, I read, he was physically harmed. Like, I guess when they had him beating up rocks, breaking up boulders in prison, they wouldn't allow him to wear sunglasses, and I guess it permanently damaged his eyesight and things like that. So, especially, but this Mars in the third house is going to give him courage, because Mars is a planet of courage, and so is the third house. So a lot of courage, but also like he incurred physical damage because of his advocacy efforts here. Which again, I don't believe that is the case for Nair. I mean, he lost his career, but I don't know that he himself ever actually got beaten up, and told to like sit in a cell and beat on rocks, for years at a time. I don't think that wasn't how things played out for him. I mean, for Nelson Mandela, it was clearly much more physical. Um, so what does all this bring? We put all this together. Objectively, again, the Saturn, Mercury, bringing attention to scandals and losses of brothers. Emotional, but suppressed or at least contained here. So he was able to kind of zip it up. I mean, as emotional as he was about this, clearly, he was able to keep himself together, at least enough of the time. I don't know if it was true all the time, to get his word out there and bring awareness to the issues in South Africa, apartheid issues. So the Lugnatia is moon. It's so the moon is digbala, directional strength as well. It's also karako bhavanasha, so that's also going to bring problems with like mother. But the fourth house relates to like lineage, family lineage, and home. So I was seeing this as kind of being like a motherland, problems with motherland, which I think South Africa. So problems with neighbors and motherland, I would say here. And the fourth house is mokshasthana, so it's a house of freedom. So his ruling planet has gone to a house of freedom. That was his main motivation in life, freedom for people. And again, related to home and lineage. So I think this is not just biological, but like even social lineage. So, and he has a bunch of yogas in his chart. He's got a pravraja yoga. That's the three plants together in the top here. That's the focus. Buddha Ditya, the sun, Mercury together in the same house, related to 1, 2, and 5 houses. He's got that. That's intelligence, Kala, Sarpa, ambition, all the planets on one side, the Rahu Ketu axis. He also has a Parvata yoga. So his Lugnatia is moon. The disposer or landlord of moon is Venus, and Venus is Swa. So, that Swa, strong, this landlord for moon gives it strength, so it brings him strength. And he's got a solar yoga, lunar, no, wait, yes, he does solar and lunar yogas. So some support there. So all this together, focus, intelligence, ambition, support, strength. And he has a Mercury-dominated chart. So this Mercury, very strong Mercury with Digbala and in its own star, it's going to heavily influence Saturn and Sun, which it's with. It also is the lord of Mars, so it's going to influence Mars. It's also the lord of Jupiter. It's going to influence Jupiter. So, yeah, I mean, this Mercury again, mesmerizing words. He was probably also mesmerized by words, not just producing them, but seems like he would read things and talk to people. Because again, this is before the internet and all that. So, but he was as much as he was on better and better behavior in prison. They were allowing him more and more access to media and even education. Because in the prison, he certain times was on and off of like correspondence legal training. I think something like that. So, yeah, but this Ashlesha energy again, it goes both ways. I think it can be words that heal, but also very harsh words. So he was speaking, and processing harsh emotional truths. Is what I was getting from his lugna here. And I even thought like snake bite medicine. That word or that phrase came to mind. And snake bite medicine, it's kind of like I think it's kind of a concept from Native American culture where it's like this notion of like when the snake bites you and injects its poison into you, like what do you do with that? Like, there can be this sort of shamanistic response where you're like, how do I transform the poison into healing? Because sometimes it's like sometimes things can be a poison or a healing tool depending on the dosage. And then maybe if we have the ability to transform or create some sort of alchemy with the poison, we can turn it into healing. And that's what I think he did. I think I even read years ago about how, again, he was in prison for a long time. And he was just like, when he started off, he was like this young, angry man, beating on rocks. And like slowly over time, he started to transform internally to be able to contain himself, all these emotions into a functional way to bring attention to these major issues in the country. But, it took 27 years in prison potentially, for that transformation to happen. So that wasn't easy. But I think he did, the snake bite medicine. And he was a little bit, I don't know how much of this kind of racist stuff he was personally subjected to because he was actually born into royalty. So he was allowed, like even education and some other things. He was part of the, black community elite. So I'm not sure, if he got the worst of the worst, although I'm sure it wasn't, a pretty harsh experience in prison. But, I mean, out in society, though, is what I meant. Before he started, speaking up and getting involved. So, I mean, I guess he could sort of like Nair in the beginning, right? He could have just, turned a blind eye to all of his natives, native inhabitants of the country and just made life cushy for himself. But no, he did the opposite. So, um, yeah. So other houses for him. Second house, Lord is Sun. So again, he's going to be a leader. He's a leader of speech. Leader of speech, going back and forth. And a high level of speech. Again, this is him even speaking as president here. Um, third house Lord is Mercury, Nasha, Mars, and Hasta. So that also, like Mars is a physical planet and Hasta is symbolized by a hand. This is literal physical handling, like harsh physical handling, because Saturn and Ketu are aspecting here as well. So again, harsh physical handling of brothers, neighbors, and, himself as well, when he got into more of the aggressive phases of his career, physically aggressive phases of his career. Then, fourth house Lord is this Swan, Venus, Moon is there, aspected by Jupiter. There's victory here because Moon is in Vishaka, probably. But it's victory at a cost. So, and he was willing to pay that cost again when he, tried to, I guess, overtake the government in a physical way. And he eventually overtook the government, but through words and thought. He was a thought leader. Um, so, but victory, sadness, motherland, royal family, well educated, seeking diplomacy. So he's got Venus, Swa, Jupiter aspecting with Moon. So this Venus, Swa, dispositor, landlord aspected by Jupiter, this is like Nair's ninth house of government. So that's why Nair worked through the system all the way up. And this guy is like, let's tear the system down, you know. But, again, for him, the fourth house is very strong because the dispositor is strong. Although it is sandhi, it's in just the last degree here um, of Taurus Venuses. So then let's see. Yeah, fifth house Lord is Mars. Rahu is there in Jesta. So this is like ambition to protect, and then it's aspected by Venus. So this is ambition to protect loved ones here in a very public, way on the public stage. Sixth house Lord is Jupiter. It aspects his own house. It's in Mrigashirsha. So this is seeking. Jupiter's in Mrigashirsha. I think Jupiter is an Ardra. Hold on, let me check on before I say anything else. Okay, yeah, I had it written wrong on the slide. It is Jupiter is an Ardra, which I mentioned. It's Jupiter's not storm cloud. Yeah, um, so the sixth house Lord is Jupiter. It does aspect its own house, the sixth house, and it's also aspected by Mars. So again, this seeking justice for violence of enemies going on in the sixth house. Seventh house Lord is Saturn. Aspects its own house, so it's going to be strong. There's going to be strong partnerships here, but the partnerships are going to be like Mercury, Sun, Ketu, so coalition of like sort of political outcasts, I would say. The fringe element, the political fringe element. The eighth house Lord is Saturn. It aspects is by Jupiter. So this is philosophy. This is Aquarius here. So philosophy seeking justice. Fixed mind seeking justice. Related to sadness and loss towards human beings. That's that Jupiter in the 12th house. Then the ninth house, Jupiter is Lord, aspected by Mars. So losses through violence, government, authority, coup. This is also legal education. Then the 10th house lord is Mars. It aspects its own sign. This is going to be very strong. Like remember, like at the end of the month, we're going to have Mars aspecting its own sign, like here, because Mars is in Virgo again. So a lot of pioneering active and a lot of activity going on in the 10th house of day-to-day 9 to 5 work. Also reputation. So he's a fighter. Um, it's also aspected by Sun and, or not Sun, but Saturn and Moon. So he's like a engineer of public fighting and pioneering. He's a pioneer of public fights. You know, and fighting for the public. The 11th house lord is a Swa Venus, very strong. But Ketu's there, so it's going to be like seeking. They're both in Mrigashirsha. That's seeking energy. So it's like seeking marginalized groups of like native people. Not just like like the grassroots campaign. Yeah, you could see it that way. Then the 12th house lord is Mercury. Again, that, Shlesha energy, snake energy, and Jupiter's there. So speaking and writing about tragic losses of people and also charity work. So yeah, so in addition to being president of the country and his imprisonment for 27 years, um, he set up, once he became president, he set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So he went back to being more of a peacemaker, and he did end up winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And then again, I just thought it was so interesting that he was able to get world famous. I mean, isn't that, I don't know, does anybody else think that's amazing? It's like this guy, in a prison in South Africa, and somehow people are having a concert for him in London while he's still in prison. I mean, before social media existed. I mean, it's like, that's a lot of powerful energy for somebody to hold. So yeah, Nelson Mandela, pretty impressive chart here. Okay, so then we have on this slide the slow-moving planets, Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, and Rahu, Ketu. 6th of July, Saturn aspects, or has an exact aspect on Venus, which I talked about. That could be a kind of throwing a monkey wrench or restructuring into relationships, or for loved ones. July 9th, Jupiter leaves combustion. Again, that should be pretty nice, because then there should be more external manifestations about all the nice things that Jupiter offers. So balance, justice, compassion, charity, diplomacy, finance, those are pretty nice things. So again, external balance, peace, diplomacy, order being restored. But again, still stormy because we're still in that Ardra energy. So still in that storm cloud energy. So we won't be out of the storm cloud energy till like getting to mid August. So we still got a ways to ride that out, but at least externally there should be more balance potentially. July 12th, Saturn goes retrograde. So this is also like kind of a heads up type of thing here. So again, Saturn is in Uccha Bhadrapada, the back legs of funeral power, where there's more objectivity with the transformation that's going on. But once it goes retrograde, and it will be retrograde till November 27th, it's going to get stronger, and it's going to back up in Purva Bhadrapada, the front legs of the funeral pyre, where there's no objectivity. So, as we get closer to November, it's probably, it's a little far out, but October, November, Saturn's going to cause more destruction here. And it's going to, again, Saturn represents history. Retrograde is going into the past. There's still some stuff that needs to be cleared out. So it's going to be reviewing the past and still more stuff that needs to be released before restructuring happens. July 20th, Ketu enters Purva Falguni Nakshatra. So again, this might be like renouncing luxuries, pleasures, or mundane life, or it might be like kind of like an eccentric interest in these things. Kind of eccentric taste, related to these things. Then July 22nd, Mars crosses Ketu, again, explosion energy, destruction, separation energy. Luckily, the Sun, the dispositor for Mars and Ketu, will be the dispositor, landlord of these two, will be in Pusha by that time. That'll be helpful in terms of containing chaos and, the disruption, to stabilize some sort of nurturing leadership potentially. Also, Will they both be in Purva Falguni at that time? Well, Mars is just shifting into Uttar Falguni, but they'll both be in Purva Falguni for a little while here, a couple days, I guess. And the Lord of Venus is, the Lord of Purva Falguni is Venus, which will be Swa. And at that point, I don't remember if it's going to be in Rohini and Mrigashirsha, but either one is pretty nice. So at least kind of underpinning energies for this Mars Ketu will be pleasant. So hopefully that'll cushion the blow, because it looks like something like that's going to happen. Then again, this might be a little bit of a rest before Sun enters Leo, because then we're going to have this fire sign Sun in its own sign, super strong with Ketu, which Sun will enter Leo August 16th. And then again, we might get some sort of unusual leadership cycle beginning, because this Ketu is going to bring some unusual energy to leadership. So yeah, so hold on to your hats for that one. And then the moon, I always have separate videos on new and full moon if you want to get into a lot of detail and kind of update yourself on the energies through the month. But on July 10th, there's going to be a full moon or Purnima in Sagittarius or Danu and Purvashada Nakshatra. Saturn is Sagittarius is a neutral sign for moon. It's also a dual fire sign, so a lot of actions, maybe contradictory even. And we'll have the aspect of Jupiter, Sun, and Saturn. So this is going to be sorting through difficult leadership news because Saturn's in Uttara Bhadrapada. Sun will be in Punarvasu, so still a sharp energy, but Jupiter's still going to be in Ardra. So there's still some stormy news coming through about leadership. And then July 24th, there's going to be a new moon or Amavasya in Cancer. So at least it'll be in its own sign. And it'll be in Pusha, which, again, these are more gentle energies than last month. Last month we had like was it Jesta? I think it was like Jesta and Ardra, and that's when things really heated up last month. So hopefully we'll have a little bit again of cushion for all the transformation that's happening here. And Moon will be conjoined with Sun and Mercury, so support of leadership, emotions, and home. Yeah, communication, leadership going on there, July 24th. Okay, so our last famous chart. This is the chart of Amelia Earhart. You may or may not have heard of her. She's an American woman. She was an aviation pioneer. And her story is she disappeared July 2nd, 1937. And she was running Jupiter, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, which I'll talk about. But she was running those planets when she disappeared. She disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, trying to become the first female pilot to circumnavigate the world. And she became really famous, actually, because she was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And when she did that, she was running Jupiter Mercury. Okay, so it's interesting because just already Jupiter not only represents news and education and teaching and students and children and charity and diplomacy and all this sort of thing, but it also represents the sky. And we have Jupiter aspecting her lugna. Okay, so and she was running Jupiter before she ended up disappearing. So that was yeah. So let's look at her chart, and again, her chart is similar to the current sky pattern. So let's see how that plays out for her. She was born July 24th, 1897, 23:30 p.m. in Atchison, Kansas, United States. And this is her, this is an exact birth time. It was based on a birth chart, so physical birth chart. So it's been verified. The Lugna Nakshatra is in Ashwini Nakshatra. Ashwini is all about pioneering. So already we've got pioneer engine energy here. And then the Sun Nakshatra was in Pusha. So she's got a very nurturing aspect to her as well. The Moon Nakshatra was in Rohini, which is pretty, great because Moon is exalted in Taurus where Rohini is. And then Rohini again is that really nice fertile, seductive type energy. So she basically has a swan moon through nakshatra. And you can see the swan moon is with or not, swan moon, swan exalted moon is with a swan Venus. I mean, that's a really phenomenal combination. And she has it in her second house. So she's going to be really great at speaking. I mean, I thought maybe she would even potentially be a singer. Because this would be like almost like a siren type of energy, like one of those, like, like in the Greek myths and stuff like that, like the sirens who sing and draw people in, the sailors in, towards the dangerous rocks. I mean, that's her. I mean, she's another one who, again, I mean, and this is at a time too, when she was coming up, but at a time when, you know, women weren't allowed to do very much. And so, weren't really taken seriously. And then she, at a very young age, became this media darling. And again, before, the internet was available. So, some people are just born with that kind of, energy or gift. So, I was like, wow, I saw her second house. I was like, oh, her second house is pretty amazing. So, but I would also see with this Venus moon, such strong Venus moon in her second house, like also a very attractive face, which she is, if you've ever seen photographs of her. She kind of looks like a model, actually. But she's going to be a very gifted speaker. And she also was like, for her raising awareness bit. So Nair was about raising awareness to atrocities versus Indians. And then Nelson Mandela was atrocities versus the Black community in South Africa. And for her, it's like basically, I don't know if she would call it atrocities, but not her, because she's got this Venus and Moon. She would soft pedal it, and she's basically like women's rights. She was a women's rights activist essentially, just by doing what she did. I mean, I don't think she went out. She wasn't forming coups against the government, like Nelson Mandela. She's gonna win people over by charming them, not mesmerizing them. Does she have? Well, she does actually. Like Mercury is in a Shlesha for her too. But her Mercury is combust, isn't it? Yeah, her Mercury is combust. So she's not actually going to fight with her words. She's going to like it's going to be she's going to fight with the ideas that she lives. Do you know what I mean? Like it's more of an indirect, softer version. Like just her being her, just her putting on like manly clothes and doing manly things and being unapologetic about it and still being like whatever beautiful, like even physically beautiful and attractive, like is going to open up the eyes of many people to trailblaze new roads for women. So her style of advocacy is going to be I would say more the opposite of Nelson Mandela than the opposite of Nair, because Nair had that combust Saturn and Mars. So the darker, he would probably have darker underpinnings, but on the surface would seem very polished. Whereas Nelson Mandela, I'm sure, was just like full on, like he was just in people's faces. I think that's what happened. Like I was reading something like I guess he had an opportunity to advocate for himself, and he showed up in like native dress or something, and he just, instead of advocating for himself, he gave a political speech. He was just like really in your face, like she's gonna have a different MO, like way style, but she's still gonna be effective and still draw people's attention through her actions, because again, her Mercury's combos now. Okay, so anyway, so the day lord is Saturn and the Ra lord is Venus. So again, there's going to be this like news, talk going on here. But this Saturn is in her eighth house. So the eighth house represents things like death, and so does Saturn. And unfortunately for her, I think that was very literal. And that's why I put like the dasha period when she disappeared. She disappeared during Jupiter, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, because I said I bet whenever she disappeared, Saturn was active, and it was. She ran a sub-period of Saturn. Um, because Saturn is also the lord of her 10th house of 9 to 5 activities, her job, and it's gone to the 8th house here. So there could be, and Rahu's there, so there could be like some mystery because Rahu's like a hidden, unexpected energy. So there's some mystery related to her work that ended up, being controversial or scandalous. And that's what happened. Apparently, like after she disappeared, there are all these different theories about what happened to her. Like she actually died, or she didn't die. She went back. And then she assumed a different name and identity. Like there's all like it, when I started, I was like, wow, people really went nuts in terms of making up stories about what actually happened to her. But they never found her body or the plane. So anyway, but you can see that in her chart. Yeah. So her birth dasha was moon, and maybe she became even more famous after she died. I don't know. Like maybe that's why I'm even talking about her. I don't know if I'd be talking about her just because she, flew over, whatever the Pacific Ocean or something. I don't know if she had made it. I don't know. Maybe she'd actually be less famous. Some people get more famous after they pass away because the scandal, kind of like the Mona Lisa, like the Mona Lisa painting was never famous until somebody stole it, and it was the story of it being stolen and being brought back to the Louvre in Paris, France, that made it famous. But before that, nobody really cared about the Mona Lisa. Sometimes it's the story, the backstory that kind of lights the fire under the fame. So her birth dasha, she was born into this fabulously strong moon, and then Mercury. So the Mercury and Ashlesha, um, and then Saturn and Ketu there. So the Ketu is going to bring unusual energy, and she's got the Saturn, she's got Ketu and Mercury together. So this is going to be an unusual thought pattern here, also unusual communication. And this Mercury and Ketu together in the 4th house of home, but also family and mother. So I was like, oh, she clearly had some sort of unconventional upbringing. And apparently her mother was very like, brought her and her sister up sort of like tomboys or whatever. Like she didn't make them wear dresses, and she let them, play with bugs and things that, nice little girls didn't do. And she said, apparently in her Wikipedia page, it said her mother didn't even want really nice little girls. That's not what she was. So I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised with this Mercury K2 Shlesha business going on in the 4th house. I was like, her mom was an alternative, unconventional type, and so it played out in her Wikipedia page. But so she's also going to be quite unconventional. There is this again Saturn in the 8th house, some sort of unfortunately tragic energy here. Um, and then this moon, like she was just, drawing people in. I mean, through her speech and her, again, Venus and moon. This is a very, beautiful, attractive person here, in speech. And then, and I think it was the thing too, is like, sometimes it wasn't like her talking sweet the way I think women were sort of usually raised to speak, but sometimes she was just very humble, or sometimes she was just very direct, and just the right words would come out. Like she's a person, like she would always say exactly the right thing to charm people. Like that's her energy here. Yeah. So, and then her dasha sequence in life. So she started off in Moon, and then she went to Mars and Rahu and Jupiter. So Moon and Mars are going to give her independent energy. And then Mars and Rahu, and Mars is going to bring a rebellious energy. Rahu is going to bring an unusual energy, and then Jupiter is going to be like her, literally flying her wings. But Jupiter is going to bring in all this aviation stuff, planes and stuff like that. So she died when she was 41. She started learning how to fly planes when she was 20. So which is about when I think really when her career took off. So how does her birth chart recreate the current sky pattern? Well, she's got Sun and Mercury in Cancer. She's got Mars in Leo, Venus in Taurus, Saturn's aspecting Taurus. And then besides that, as I mentioned, she's just got such a strong moon and moon and Venus. It's like pretty phenomenal, actually. So, yeah, I'm not surprised the media just gobbled her up, really. Okay, so let's go through house by house for her and see what she's got going on. So again, her lugna is Aries or Mesha, so it's a movable fire sign. So a lot of activity, which again, if she's literally flying around on her own, that would qualify. And then she has an aspect by this Jupiter that's in planetary war. You can see it's in planetary war with Mars. They're in the same degree. And Jupiter's in Purva Falguni. So again, this like finer things in life, enjoyment energy. And Jupiter represents the sky. So this is she loves flying. And then Mars is there as machines. So air machines, sky machines, airplanes. Yeah. And then it's in the fifth house. So it's on a public stage, especially because she's an Aries rising, like that communal collective energy chart, those collective energy charts I was showing. And this is all happening in Leo. So this is a high level. She's an elite flyer. She's also an advisor. And she did advising of planes and also advising of other women, like professionally. She was a mentor to other women. So yeah, so sky pioneer, and also her ascendant is Ashwini. So she's a sky pioneer. um, or aviation pioneer, I guess. Very active, thrill seeker. That's the other thing. A thrill seeker is what I'm seeing here. Also, teacher. She wrote some books, and also she was a visiting professor. Um, so yeah, and again, just I think by the way she lived her life, she was a teacher for people, um, rather than just like you know preaching all the time. She was practicing what she preached, and she taught. Or what was it? What's that? Was it that quote from, I think it was Gandhi. It's like preach with your perfume. It's like you don't even have to like say things sometimes. Just you go live your life, do your thing, and then you sort of lead by example. Yeah. So, but there again, there's going to be unusual energy here because Ashwini, the star of Ashwini, is Ketu. So, Ketu again, it always brings an unusual energy. And so she's got a bunch of yogas in her chart as well. Pravraja yoga, that's the life focus in the fourth house, those three planets. Buddhaditya yoga, intelligence. Gajakesari yoga, networking. Yoga. Saraswati yoga, so creativity. Solar yoga, support. Kahala yoga, um, times two. So that's support, especially leadership as well. So all this together, focus, intelligence, network, creativity, support, strength, leadership. And she, unlike Nelson Mandela, who had more of a Mercury dominated chart, she has a moon dominated chart. So the moon is more of an intuitive mind and also emotional mind, whereas the Mercury is more of a logical, analytical mind. So she's going to be less of a strategist, strategy-based person, and more of an intuitive-based person. Um, Yeah. So her second house lord is a Swa, in this massive second house. I can't get over it. It's like Swa Venus with a Swa exalted Swa moon, Swa through her its star. Its moon is in its own star. Aspected by Saturn and Rahu. So a gifted speaker, attractive woman, mentor to other women. Also very strong family and probably a pretty posh young childhood life, which I think it was. Like her grandmother left her a trust fund. Her father was an alcoholic, and so her mother created this trust fund so her father wouldn't end up drinking it away. The thing though is that trust fund ended up drying up because I guess some investments were made that lost money. So actually, she had to. All of them actually end up going through cycles of poverty, despite the strength in their charts. So she had to. We'll get to the seventh house, but basically, her seventh house is the lord of the seventh house is Venus, which is Swa, and it's with this massive moon. So what I was seeing there is sponsorships, especially because Venus and Moon are so strong in the second house of assets. Um, so yeah, so I think this is her being able to get people to fund her in all of her aviation activities because she on her own didn't have money, it was all through sponsorships. And even her trip across the Atlantic, not the one where she flew solo, but she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. And it was actually this well-to-do woman who was going to do it. And then her family basically emotionally blackmailed her, said they weren't going to support her and her kids were going to withdraw from college and stuff if she actually did it. So she backed out, but she still wanted it to happen. So she actually was the underwriter funding source for Amelia to do it in her place. So yeah, pretty well-to-do sponsors and business partnerships going on here. So anyway, so the second house, gifted speaker, women's advocate, well off during youth, unusual profession, I would say, speaking about an unusual profession because that Rahu is going to bring unusual energy to her work. She has an unusual job, but also like all the difficulties as well that were involved there. But again, this second house is going to make her a media darling for sure, because she speaks so well and she looks so good, essentially. Third house, Lord is Mercury. Again, attention grabbing actions through writing as well. But again, attention grabbing actions just through the way she lived her life was what I'm seeing. But she did write some books. I think she wrote 3 books. And the fourth house Lord is Moon, which we know is super strong. Got Sun there, Ketu and Pusha, and a combust Mercury and a salacious. So unusual family, like I said, unconventional. Mom, speaking of unusual profession, and then mom not wanting to raise, conventional girls. Fifth house Lord is Sun. Planetary war with Mars. There's also a karako with Jupiter. So I don't know if she had kids. I didn't look at that, but I'm guessing she had trouble having kids, or um, maybe just because of her lifestyle. I don't know if physically she did, but yeah. And then but yeah, all this going on in Leo, like an elite advice, fun, but fun. I said fun sky machine engineer. Like basically, she was an elite advisor for airplanes and pilots, but trouble with children. But also, she also has a sense of duty here. So what she was doing, it might have looked like it was just all for fun and games, but she felt a sense of duty in doing what she did, so that women could feel like they had more of a choice in the way they directed their lives. Then the sixth house Lord is Mercury, aspected by Rahu and Shravana. So Shravana brings like the storytelling energy, like so story of unusual enemies and accidents is what I'm seeing here, like mesmerizing, accidents, because the sixth house can be accidents, and Mercury, and the Lord of that is this Mercury in Ashleisha. So some story about, and then Mercury's combust, so some story about literally disappearing. That's so wild. That's so literal in this chart. Wow, I just got that myself as I said it out loud. So some strange, bizarre story about an accident disappearing. Literally. Wow. That's pretty tight. Oh wow. Yeah, I get it, just even speaking this out loud, I get more out of these charts. It's pretty amazing. So the way Jyotish works, at least for me. So then the seventh house Lord is Venus, which we know is super strong in Mrigashirsha. So this is seeking partnerships. So again, that's what I saw as like seeking supportive sponsors, like especially bringing the money so that it would support her flying habit, essentially. Um, eighth house Lord is Mars. It aspects its own, so there's some protection here. Again, this is other people's money. This is eighth house, so there's protection here. But we have the Sandhi retrograde Saturn in Vishaka, aspected by Venus and Moon. So transforming the tradition of women. Because again, the Scorpio is going to bring transformational energy, and Mars and Saturn together can bring engineering, but it can also be like Mars rebelling against Saturn, which is history and tradition. Um, yeah, so I think it's more about her busting, creating new roads, again, transforming history and tradition, and for women is deep in her mind here. An alternative rebellious mindset I also wrote, so I think those are true. So the ninth house Lord is Jupiter. It does aspect its own house, and again, that's going to bring, again, support of authority, also education, also publishing. She had some teaching gigs. And then, let's see, her 10th house, the Lord is Saturn. It's gone to the 8th house of, long-term problems and even death. And Saturn is there, pretty compromised, I would say. Rahu's there, so there's some unusual aspect to her work. But again, it could be, since the Lord of the 10th house has gone to the 8th like this, it could be like some unusual way of passing, like her disappearance, It's also aspected by Sun and Mercury. So again, there's ambition. Rahu brings ambition. 10th house is sky. Ambition to sky, odd work, tragedy. All these things I think are true. And the 11th house, Lord of Saturn. It's aspected by Jupiter and Mars. So this is like, groups of aviators I'm seeing here. And she did start like some, I don't know if they're still in existence, but like organizations for female pilots. But I'm also seeing here that, this is like something that's like long lived because the Lord is still Saturn and Saturn has gone to the 8th house here. So this could be again like a, story that never ends. This could be like groups that never end, that like persist, which, as far as I know, they both still persist. But I don't know about the group of aviators. But her story, I mean, when you talk about Amelia Earhart in the United States, it's like, oh, pilot who disappeared. I don't know. It might even like, or female pilot who disappeared. I guess you would use 3 words to describe her to get the overall gist. Then the 12th house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Mars. So Mars can be machines, like I said, in 12th house, can be losses and expenditures, isolated places. So this could be like machine or, that's lost, which happened, and then it's with Jupiter. So a sky machine that's been lost. And then it really, I mean, again, this is so literal in her chart, like it's Pisces, which is a dual water sign. So literally crossing waters, like sky machine lost in remote places crossing waters. I mean, this chart really kind of blew me away. It's like, you don't always get charts that are so literal, but hers really was. So very interesting woman, but very interesting chart. So yeah, did I mention everything about her? So again, she was an author. She wrote some books and started up some female pilot organizations. She was a faculty member, advisor, counselor. All these conspiracy theories about did she actually die and how or why or when and then I think they finally just a couple years after she disappeared legally declared her dead. I guess usually they waited 7 years, but I guess her husband at the time asked to move that date up so that he could take care of her finances and estate or whatever, because otherwise it would have been 7 years of waiting to be able to do that. But I guess they waited a couple years and then called it. And then she's in both the aviation and women's halls of fame. So she has made her mark in the world. So, yeah, interesting chart. And again, more advocacy, more raising awareness of issues, but again, different styles. So that's also kind of an interesting learning, part of all this as well, in terms of, what these people, their legacy was and how they went about it. Okay, so there you go. Thanks so much, as always, for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. I really appreciate all your support for my work in the channel. Everybody who stops in to listen and post a comment, like, subscribe, send in donations. It's such a blessing in my life. So thank you all for all of that. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video, where I list all the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info on that. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, so other Vedic arts, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there for you too. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.